We talked already, if you're out on people's private property, during hunting season, making sure you have blaze orange or some type of high visibility clothing. Ever have anybody run you off their property and not want you on their property? What's your policy and procedure related to that? Well, I would hope that as an agency or a health district that somebody would have steps in place that if you are confronted by an aggressive or hostile client, family member, property owner, restaurateur, whomever, and you're met up with some sort of workplace violence issue, that you have policies and procedures in place to address that. Do you continue the services you're supposed to provide, or do you back off? Who do you report it to? What is your, what's the supervisor's responsibility and role? Do you need to get the police involved in it? All those types of things. So think about that. If you don't have that, then probably need to work on it. This goes back to that whole situational awareness and those people that are working by themselves. All right, I want to talk a little bit about slips, trips, and falls now. We do see lots of slips, trips, and falls. There was almost $289,000 in the workers' comp losses. And this would be maybe somebody's going out wherever and they come across this little dam as they're going to check something out as far as in the field. And that's all good and dandy that we recognize, wet leaves, wet grass, but I want to talk a little bit more about home health care and employees going to a client's home. You arrive at an employee's home and you're evaluating it, and the steps up to the property to get into the front door look makeshift, look a little bit rickety, look a little bit maybe, I'm not so sure if that's stable. What do you do? Do you go up the steps and ring the doorbell? What do you do? Has anybody ever talked to you about that? Do you have procedures in place? We've spent a lot of money on staff members falling through porches, steps, collapsing from client homes, falling down steps. Once they're in a client's home, being hurt inside because we might have a hoarding situation where they're stumbling over stuff. We might have cleanliness issues. We might have elevation drops on the property and staff not knowing. Is there anything that you have in place that says, hey, those steps look kind of rickety. I'm not sure I'm comfortable going up them. Do you go up them anyway? Do you stop? Do you call your supervisor? What do you do?
Michelle? This is Jan in Cumberland again. Hey.
Hey.
We recently had a training somewhat related to this. It kind of revolved around our staff going into homes where there may be safety issues, drug involvement, concerns of physical safety while the employee was in there doing a nursing home screening, whatever assessment. And we've advised our staff, if they're uncomfortable for any reason, just not to go in. Report that to their supervisor, report the conditions, report the circumstances, we'll reevaluate it. It may be that we need to call the client to come to us to do whatever assessment needs to be done. But we want to make sure that the employee's safety is the first consideration when they go into a home.
And I would agree with you 100%. That's exactly what I would hope all districts are doing, is that if you arrive on a property and the steps look like they're tattered or torn, or maybe they're wood and they're starting to rot, or there's indications that maybe it's not safe, two things: either stop, contact your supervisor and say, hey, you know what, this just doesn't look stable or safe, or contact the client and see, is there another way in the home? Is there a back door we can go in? Is there another way to enter the actual property or the residence without going up that particular stairway. And I would agree 100% with you regarding illicit activity that may be occurring inside the home. I talk about this from a safety perspective with anything that we do. If those little hairs on the back of your neck stand up and you have that instinct that something's just not right and something might go wrong, listen to your instinct, back up for a few minutes and reassess and reevaluate the situation and determine, is it really safe for you to be doing whatever activity you're doing. You have a right as an employee that if you don't feel comfortable and your workplace is not safe, you have the right to not enter that space. And as long as you're communicating your reasons why and contacting your supervisor, I would hope that they would be diligent enough to listen to you and say, okay, I understand. Can you document it with pictures? Can you, well, let's reevaluate it, let's regroup, and let's see, maybe we need to have them come, like you said, to the clinic versus us going out to them. It also states in your general safety and employee health program that, you're supposed to report any unsafe conditions or potential hazards to your supervisor or a safety committee member. And lots of times we only think about that being our office environment and not extending it to our vehicle or to our, our clients' homes, the restaurants that we might enter, all those places. If you feel it's an unsafe environment, then you should not be in it. Okay? I strongly support that. I think that management would support it. I know HR here in central office supports that. We've had discussions about that. And I will tell you that most of the slips, trips, and fall incidents that have occurred that I pulled out of those 47 with almost $300,000 of workers' comp losses, most of them were related to slips, trips, and falls on stairs in clients' homes, in parking lots related to visits, or in restaurants where people have slipped on, greasy, wet floors. So think about that when you're going in there. Make sure that your staff is evaluating their workplace, just like you would look at your own home for stuff on the floor. Look there too. Look also, make sure you have good footwear. Make sure it's slip-resistant footwear. Make sure you're wearing the right type of shoes for the right type of environment that you're in and for the right time of season. Also, we've had incidents where people have had workplace violence. They've been attacked by family members. They've been attacked by the clients. Keep all of that into consideration when you're talking about your situational awareness and your personal safety. If you don't feel comfortable and you don't feel safe, then you shouldn't be there. Any other questions? Any other slips, trips, or falls or hazards related to that you've encountered in the work environment that I haven't covered? Oh, I should say this too. I have seen in your workers' comp losses for your agency, uneven terrain, groundhog holes, those types of things. Some of it we can't control, but you can always, I go back to that walking stick. I know people, that's one more piece of equipment we have to carry, but it might be one of those things that saves you in the long run. So kind of think outside of the box. I know we're good at what we do. That's the job we're done. Let's just take it one step up and look at how can we be safe, because the injury that you have to yourself doesn't just affect you. It affects your family members. it affects the people that you work with. I'm sure we're all 100%. Are we 100% staffed at VDH, Jeff? Okay. So we're probably already working short-staffed. Maybe the job of 4 people's now down to 3. So there's 3 of us doing the work of 4. You're out, you're doing whatever you're doing, you get hurt again, somebody else gets hurt. So now it's 2 doing the job of 4, and shortcuts are going to happen. People are going to take shortcuts because we got to get this stuff done, you know. So when you work short-staffed, there is statistical evidence. If you play with the numbers and you've looked at numbers long enough, that when people get injured, the likelihood of more injuries happening goes way up. So any questions on slips, trips, and falls and entering non-VDH property?
Michelle, and while Jeff's there, this is Jan again in Cumberland. I have a quick question. If a client goes into a home and they feel like they've sort of been verbally assaulted by a very hostile client, and they leave, do I need to, I mean, how do I document that other than sort of a workplace violence report? Do I need to involve police and things like that? Or I've never had it happen, but I've had one employee tell me that they sort of felt very threatened in an environment 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm not quite sure what I would need to do other than documenting what physically happened, and I don't know whether it involved the police.
I'm going to say that's, of course, definitely go to the workplace violence policy. Talk with your management team and involve central office, because that's probably going to be a case by case. I know you don't like that answer, but most things are case by case when it comes to those type issues. So yeah, the first thing you do is go to workplace violence, get your management staff involve central office, and then, but of course, if it's something severe, yes, immediately call the police.
If it's a hands-on.
Yeah, I mean, if it's
right, if there's physical attack, absolutely. But I think she just kind of felt like she had to watch over her shoulder, and you know, she lived within the same community where it happened, and she really felt threatened and somewhat assaulted, I guess, and by that. So, you know, like Jeff said, I'm sure it's a case by case basis, but I just didn't know whether in situations like that I should report that to the police or not.
I think that would be up to your management team. I think one of the strategies that you could use is if you have to go visit that client the next time, instead of sending, you know, and I know this gets to be a staffing issue, and if there's directors or, you know, the powers that be that are there may not agree with it, but, you know, there's always that possibility if it's that much of a issue, send 2 people. One, maybe it's just a personality conflict. I mean, you know, unfortunately, when we're dealing with humans, sometimes it's just a personality conflict. So, you know, if you send another person, maybe it's enough to de-escalate it, or maybe there is just something, the 2 just, you know, their personalities for whatever reason don't get along. Or maybe it is something bigger, and the second individual that's with the first individual may say, yeah, you know, I think something's wrong, and then report back. So I would think before you get the police involved, talk to your management team, come up with a strategy, and I would say one strategy you might want to use is doing work teams of 2 versus sending individual. And I know that's not always possible in every scenario, but it may be enough that it de-escalates whatever the situation was going on at the previous visit. So I don't know if that helps. Is there anybody else out there that an environmental health specialist who've had to go inspect a restaurateur and been met with physical violence or brandishing a firearm or something to that nature, and had to get, or do you have a policy on that? Do you get the police involved? What do you do? Or do you, you know, Anybody out there have any comments, thoughts? Well, I think that's something else you need to think about is, there are other agencies that have to go into establishments, and they have policies and procedures in place that if a landowner or private sector individual were to approach you in that kind of manner, they have policies and procedures in place. So I would think, I don't know if drinking water has any policies or procedures, or what their maybe internal district-wide, or what the rule of thumb is. It doesn't have to necessarily be written down, but if anybody has anything to share on that, I would sure other people would appreciate to hear that. All right, if you're out in the field, and you come across a brush fire, make sure you don't get encircled by it. That would be those people that are out and about in the field. All right, some of us have to walk up and down roadways to get where we need to go. And I think the big thing here is, remember, if you have to walk out on the side of the road for any reason like this, you walk facing traffic, don't have your back to traffic, get as far over onto the shoulder as you can. If possible, if you could walk on the other side of the guardrail, that would even be better. Make sure you're wearing those high visibility vests, and then again, think about all the things that we talked about, the insects, bugs, and critters that you might come in contact with, slip, trip, and fall hazards you might come in contact with, and making sure you're wearing the appropriate PPE or boots and shoes and longer pants to try to protect you the best that you can. All right, we already talked about the whole workplace violence situation. Like I said, I'm going to go back and hope that everybody has something, some plan, whether it's written or not, on how to defuse, or what are you going to do in a situation where you come across a disgruntled landowner or client or resident. Okay. And then the last thing that I would like to talk to you about is first aid. If you're out in a state vehicle, do you have a first aid kit? Who's inspecting those first aid kits? Who inventories them? Who replaces them? Who stocks them? Think about those things, especially since you're the remote worker and you're working by yourself. You want to make sure that you have at least minimal, if you get a cut or something like that, that you have the ability to take care of minor cuts and scrapes while you're out in the field. Okay. So the big thing you need to think about if and when you work alone is make sure you plan your day and work your plan. If things change, communicate that with somebody. The biggest thing is communicate. Make sure you let people know where you're going to be so that we can go and start to look for you. Be prepared. Think about everything that you're doing and what's going on around you. That whole situational awareness, personal awareness, making sure that you know your way out, making sure that if you're not comfortable in a situation, that you back away. Check in periodically.